on the news. The Russian offensive in Ukraine is expanding, and an airstrike explodes dangerously close to Poland. And now a fourth round of peace talks resumes. But is there any hope of a ceasefire? Pope Francis condemning the violence, saying, "In the name of God, I ask you, stop this massacre." This comes as some suggest it will stop if the Holy Father himself travels into the middle of the war zone. The NYPD is searching for a man who they say is targeting and killing the homeless in New York City and Washington, D.C. Plus, the 8th grade robotics team at St. Joseph the Worker is back in class with bragging rights following a big competition this weekend. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. The war in Ukraine gaining heat as the refugee crisis grows. 2.7 million people now estimated to have fled the country, mass migrating to Poland, Slovakia, and other European nations to avoid the latest wave of Russian attacks to the west. In the latest offensive strike, Russia hit a large military base in the western city of Lviv, killing and injuring dozens. This as a fourth round of talks between the two nations has hit a pause. Chris Wynn has the latest.
Chaos and devastation as Russia intensifies its assault on Ukraine. Russian missiles hit a large military base near the western city of Lviv, killing at least 35 people and leaving more than 130 injured, according to local authorities. The attack not far from Poland, drawing the war even closer to the borders of a NATO country. Russian forces also opening fire on 2 American journalists, killing one while wounding the other, according to Kyiv police.
We crossed a checkpoint and they start shooting at us. So the driver turned around and they kept shooting.
In Kyiv, there have been heavy explosions and multiple casualties after authorities say a residential building in the Ukrainian capital was hit by shelling.
Sick kids fleeing on makeshift medical trains. The unthinkable bombing of a maternity ward. Parents weeping over their children's broken bodies in the streets.
U.S. officials say Russia has asked China for military support, including drones, as well as economic assistance. Both countries deny the request was made.
We will not stand by and allow any country to compensate Russia for its losses from the economic sanctions.
Meanwhile, the fourth round of talks between Ukraine and Russia were put on hold until Tuesday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will give a virtual address to Congress on Wednesday. Chris Wynn, Currents News.
Pope Francis using the word massacre in describing the war during his Sunday Angelus.
In nome di Dio vi chiedo fermate questo massacro.
The Holy Father's plea following the news of the killing of children, innocents, and unarmed civilians. The pontiff then led the people in St. Peter's Square in a moment of silent prayer for peace, while encouraging parish and religious orders to continue their prayers for an end to the war. But are prayers all the Vatican can do to bring about peace? Later in the newscast, we'll speak with editor at Crux, John Allen, about Pope Francis's role in ending this war. Again, John Allen, editor of Crux, will join us later in this newscast. Meanwhile, will President Biden give Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky what he is asking for to end the war? The two men spoke on Friday, and multiple sources are saying Zelensky asked Biden for further efforts to cut Russia off from international trade, including closing off access to international waterways and to continue targeting the Russian elite. Biden is revoking Russia's favored trade status with the U.S., which Zelensky thanked him for, while stressing the need to ratchet up economic pressure on the Kremlin. The war in Ukraine has caused a sudden rise in geopolitical tension. As the Ukrainian people are now suffering through genocide and a refugee crisis, the global economy has been shaken. But the world and the United States has been here before. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has more.
Fears of a growing threat reach far beyond the Ukrainian border. They pierce the hearts of people right here in New York City.
This guy in the Kremlin can push the button at any time. You know, everybody in the whole world is supposed to be worried about it now.
Possibly being on the heels of another Cold War has those who remember the first overcome with a terrifying nostalgia.
We have a serious problem. People dying right now, killing innocent children and women. What the hell is this? It's a Nazi in 1939.
Russia has demonstrated a willingness to use chemical warfare, cyber warfare, obliterating and minimizing a free press.
Brian Brown, a St. John's University professor of political science, says a modern Iron Curtain could already be dropping on Eastern Europe.
As technology and times have changed, you know, Russia is a real threat to freedom and democracy and stability, economic stability.
30 years after the end of the Cold War, Washington and Moscow still control more than 90% of the world's nuclear warheads, enough to destroy most life on Earth. But despite the infamous drills done by school children back in those days, the threats of nuclear warfare aimed at the United States were always just that. Some in Brooklyn's Russian and Ukrainian stronghold of Brighton Beach say those threats have always loomed, and what we're up against now is much different.
I think the Cold War is going on for some time already. Now we're talking about the real war.
During the Cold War, St. John Paul II played a significant role in aiding the fall of communism. But now Pope Francis seems to be taking a more measured approach. He has yet to mention Russia by name.
Ripeto, tacciano le armi. Dio sta con gli operatori di pace, non con chi usa la violenza.
Brown says with a global stage and the moral authority is offering Vatican-led mediation enough to derail Vladimir Putin's by any means necessary approach to an already unjustified war.
There's many ways where he can use his bully pulpit and his position of global neutrality to condemn Russia by name, to call this what it is.
The fear now, as both information and propaganda are delivered in an instant, is the years between the last Cold War and a potential new one will be forgotten. And that this Cold War will be far worse than the first. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
You can help the people of Ukraine. Just head over to thetablet.org/where to give to help Ukraine. There you can find a list of reputable charities working on the ground. The Bishop of Brooklyn, Robert Brennan, is calling on the faithful to act. You can give aid and support to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters in need by donating to the Diocese of Brooklyn's Compostela Fund. 100% of the money collected will provide direct assistance to those affected by the war. Just make a check payable to the Compostela Fund of the Archdiocese of Brooklyn with the notation Ukraine and mail it to Diocesan Finance Office, 310 Prospect Park West, Brooklyn, New York, 11215. A manhunt is underway for a shooter who is targeting the homeless. Law enforcement is calling this man a cold-blooded serial killer. Detectives in both New York City and Washington, D.C. are searching for him. There have been 5 shootings of men in both cities over the past 2 weeks. Each shooting happened in the middle of the night, and all of the victims were men who were homeless. 2 of the victims died from their wounds. Meanwhile, the NYPD has a new weapon against gun violence. Officers in a new anti-gun unit hit the streets Monday. They're now patrolling neighborhoods across the city that have seen an increase in shootings during the pandemic. About 300 officers in all will be part of Mayor Eric Adams' crime-fighting plan. They're being trained in minimal force techniques, with de-escalation skills being a priority. Cardinal Timothy Dolan's mother has passed away. The Archbishop of New York speaking of his loss during Sunday's homily at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
And as much as I'll sure miss her, I'm at peace because I'm confident that she is. At 93, she rejoiced in a very full life.
Cardinal Dolan adding his mother's reward is true citizenship in heaven. In recent years, Shirley Jean Dolan had lived in an assisted living facility in Missouri. There's a lot more news headed your way. We'll hear from the 2 top cardinals dispatched by Pope Francis to Ukraine as the Vatican's representatives. And trains are crucial in helping refugees flee the violence in Ukraine. We find out the extraordinary measures being taken to keep them running.
They don't get enough pats on the back.
And we'll meet a retired nurse who has created a unique piece of art in tribute to her fellow nurses on the front lines battling COVID.
In nome di Dio vi chiedo fermate questo massacro.
Pope Francis with a papal plea, his strongest condemnation of the war so far. As we mentioned earlier, the Holy Father calling for the massacre in Ukraine to stop. But can he do more to help bring an end to the violence? John Allen, editor at Crux, joins us now from Rome to dig deeper into this. And John, the Pope using some strong words talking about the Russian invasion, calling it an unacceptable armed aggression, and demanding in the name of God for this massacre to stop. So aside from condemning the war, what more can he do?
Well, hey, Christine, first of all, we should not miss how important what he did in that clip that you just showed. One criticism of the Vatican heretofore is that it has been overly restrained, overly deferential to Russia, and not nearly forceful enough in its public rhetoric. All of this is unusually pointed and direct, and I think that signals a shift to some extent in the Vatican approach away from its normal caution towards more participating in the budding global anti-Putin coalition, even if Pope Francis still, so far, has not yet referred to Putin by name.
Right, and you recently wrote about a well-known actress in Italy who's from Ukraine publicly appealing to Pope Francis to go immediately to Kyiv, saying his presence would force Putin to halt his attacks. So is that even a possibility? I mean, do we really want to send the Pope into a war zone?
Well, first of all, you've just got to love Italians, Christine. And now this is, of course, a Ukrainian immigrant in Italy, but she spent many years here. And for Italians, the Pope is always both the cause of and the solution to all of the world's problems. And so wherever there is a hot spot, they expect the Pope to sort of drop in, wave a magic wand, and make the problem go away. How realistic that is remains to be seen. We should note, if Pope Francis were to go to Kyiv, this would not be the first time he has gone to an active war zone. He did so in the Central African Republic a few years back. He was so determined that he told the pilots on his Alitalia flight that if they didn't feel they could get him there safely, they should just give him a parachute, because one way or the other he was going. Now, I'm quite confident that at the moment, the security situation would make such a trip probably impossible. Right now, Kyiv is a city under siege. It is being bombarded. Russian forces are advancing. We may be looking at urban combat in a matter of days. But the broad notion that the actress was reflecting, which is there is kind of an expectation in many quarters that perhaps Pope Francis could do something, if not out front behind the scenes. I think that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out, Christine.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, while the Pope has been speaking out against the war, he hasn't directly mentioned Vladimir Putin. What can you tell us about the Pope's relationship with the Russian president? We know Putin has visited the Vatican more than any other world leader and has actually met with Francis 3 times in the past.
Yeah, well, Christine, the reason Putin has been to the Vatican so many times is because he's been around so long, and that can happen when you don't really have to face democratic re-election. So, look, I think up to this point, up to the crisis in Ukraine, many of us who pay attention to the Vatican on a professional basis would have told you that the relationship between Pope Francis and Putin was surprisingly good. This isn't quite an alliance, but it's a kind of cautious détente. And the relationship seems to be deteriorating by the day. That said, the Vatican does want to produce some scintilla of hope that it could be involved in negotiation efforts. Cardinal Parolin said on Saturday that the Vatican is totally available to mediate this conflict. He added, however, in another interview today, so far the Russians haven't shown much interest.
All right, John Allen, editor at Crux, thanks so much for your insight.
Anytime, Christine.
Working on behalf of the Holy Father is top Cardinal Konrad Krajewski. Cardinal Krajewski seen here helping volunteers unload humanitarian aid at a Caritas center in northwest Ukraine. He went on to visit several Catholic communities in the area, saying Mass and meeting with volunteers who are helping displaced people. The other top cardinal meant to express the Pope's closeness, Cardinal Michael Czerny, is preparing to leave for Slovakia soon. The cardinal just got back from a 4-day mission to Hungary, where he met with Ukrainian refugees on behalf of Pope Francis.
They understood that the Pope was with them. They understood that he cared for them very much and was doing everything he could to help with this awful situation. So I felt that, not thanks to me, but thanks to the Holy Spirit, in fact, the mission was accomplishing itself. All I had to do was walk in, and they knew.
Cardinal Czerny will arrive in Slovakia on March 16th and is expected to travel to the Ukrainian border in the following days. Travel by train has continued in Ukraine despite the intensity of the Russian invasion. The trains have continued to run in much of the country, carrying supplies and refugees and increasing the odds for Ukraine's survival. Scott McLean met the people who help run this vital system.
First light in Ternopil, Ukraine is the rising sun. The city's lights have been kept off since the war began. More than 2 weeks that have exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely upended normal life. But through it all, Ukraine's rail network has kept running. Every morning, the railway's executives, led by 37-year-old Alexander Kamoyshin, gather for a morning call. No cell phones, no Zoom, just a Soviet-era closed-circuit phone system that connects every station. They won't stay here long. They can't. They believe they're a prime Russian target.
The strategy is to move fast so that they don't catch you.
How long can you stay in one place?
Hours.
Instead, their work managing 231,000 employees continues on a single-car train headed west, for now. Often their work is aboard ordinary passenger trains to blend in with the masses. Since the war began, they've been in near constant motion, crisscrossing the country to keep the Russians guessing. The decision to leave their headquarters in Kyiv was made in the early morning hours of February 24th. Kamoyshin snapped one last picture with his 2 young kids, one still asleep.
Are they still in Ukraine? How does that make you feel?
For me, it's easier when I know that they're safe and I have time to do my job.
The country's rail network, one of the largest in the world, has been a lifeline in war, moving desperately needed supplies in and desperate people out of danger, more than 2 million since the invasion began. Schedules are drawn up the night before and changed in response to panic scenes like this one in Kharkiv or in Lviv in the early days of war.
How on earth have people still been able to use the trains in a war zone?
That's something which is surprising for the whole country and for the president as well.
Surprising because every day the network is hit by Russian bombs. Small damage breaks the link between cities temporarily, a downed bridge indefinitely. Near Kharkiv, an undetonated bomb fell right next to the tracks.
We are reacting and repairing a railway even under artillery shelling every day. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues have been killed and injured during shelling.
Again, that was Scott McLean reporting. So far, 33 railway workers have been killed, 24 injured. Now to the latest on the COVID front. China is grappling with its largest surge of COVID infections since the coronavirus first emerged more than 2 years ago. This as the country marks its 5th consecutive day of reporting more than 1,000 daily cases. Now Chinese officials are implementing some of their most stringent methods, ordering roughly 51 million people into lockdown and closing most businesses in the impacted areas until March 20th. China's new restrictions come as the U.S. loosens its own mandates. Now, one Colorado nurse is honoring the healthcare heroes who made that milestone possible.
There was a lot of darkness and a lot of sadness. I wanted to access the light somehow.
It's called the Light of Appreciation, a 4-foot-tall chandelier that, amid its dazzling crystals, holds nearly 300 empty vaccine vials. Laura Weiss, the artist who created the stunning piece, is a retired nurse who helped out with her community's vaccination efforts. And she says she just wanted to show appreciation for her fellow nurses.
I think they like it a lot. You know, they don't get enough pats on the back. And so if I can even just be a part of saying thank you, that feels pretty good.
This isn't the first time Weiss has crafted pandemic-inspired art. In September of 2020, she created COVID Deaths Count, an installation that contained thousands of miniature American flags to symbolize all of the Americans who lost their lives to the pandemic. Still to come on Currents News, using innovative solutions to solve real-world problems. Why the robotics team at St. Joseph the Worker is back in class with bragging rights. Plus this.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's play hockey!
How a Minnesota community came together to help one boy create a league of his own. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. We have an exciting update to a story we brought to you last week. The 8th grade robotics team at St. Joseph the Worker Catholic Academy competed in the first Lego League City Championship over the weekend and received the second place Innovation Project Award. The award is given to teams that can provide innovative solutions to real-world problems. And the students at St. Joseph the Worker were able to do so by using QR codes to tackle the issue of delivery thefts. So congratulations to the team. A 12-year-old with a rare medical condition was frustrated he couldn't play organized hockey with his friends, so he decided to start his own neighborhood league instead. Currents News' Monica Guy has his amazing story.
Grow up in a state where little more than a puddle is an invitation to skate, and sometimes fate can be cruel.
Kind of makes me feel sad,
Owen Lipinski is a hockey fanatic whose parents feel his pain.
Marfan syndrome is a connective tissue disorder.
Diagnosed at 2 with Marfan, Owen was warned that as he grew, a hard blow could threaten his life.
My body's kind of, it's not as strong as most other people's.
Playing for Minnesota Special Hockey has been fun, but Owen wanted more. And that's all you need to know about today.
Let's play hockey!
He walked up to my doorstep and asked me if I wanted to play. This is so unreal to me.
Skaters and fans and all kinds of excitement. What else could this be? And all of Owen's doing.
Everybody come here!
I wasn't sure it was going to get pulled off. But
And then he did it. 6 teams Owen recruited from his neighborhood, and Owen with his goalie dreams in the net for every game. Owen came up with the teams, designed their logos, and sold raffle tickets to help pay for their jerseys. Safe, surrounded by friends aware of Owen's condition.
it's just be safe, okay?
And parents keeping a close watch after finding themselves recruited too, for announcing and scorekeeping and more.
I am the Zamboni.
While the parents, once unsure of how their son would cope with his diagnosis, watching as Owen puts their worries on ice. Monica Guy, Currents News.
Good for him. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.